Hello everyone, I am the Bloodgate and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel also. Where are you from and what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax. It was around 3 a.m. when Mia woke up to a loud knock at her door. She sat up in bed, blinking in the darkness, disoriented. She thought maybe she was dreaming, but then she heard it again, 3 loud, deliberate knocks. She hesitated, heart pounding, glancing over at her husband Luke, but he was sound asleep. She got up quietly, tiptoeing to the front door. She could see the faint glow of a porch light casting long shadows across her living room. As she approached, her nerves got the better of her, and she paused, just listening. The silence was thick, stretching on until she thought maybe whoever it was had left. But as she turned to go back to bed, a voice called softly from the other side. "Hello?" A raspy, almost whispering voice broke the stillness, sending a chill down her spine. "I know you're in there." Mia froze, every instinct screaming for her to ignore it. She forced herself to breathe, counting each breath in her mind, trying to decide what to do. She felt an overwhelming sense of dread, like if she opened the door, something terrible would happen. Just then, she heard a faint scratching sound, like fingernails scraping against the wood. The voice came again, softer this time. "Let me in. I just need a little help." Her hand hovered over the doorknob, her curiosity at war with the icy fear creeping through her veins. She wanted to tell the person to leave, but she couldn't bring herself to speak. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the knocking stopped. She let out a shaky breath, but as she turned away, the voice returned, louder and angrier. "I saw you look, Mia. I know you're there." Her heart nearly stopped. How did they know her name? She hadn't looked outside, hadn't even peeked through the peephole. She backed away from the door, the sound of her pulse roaring in her ears. Then she heard it, 3 more knocks, slow and heavy. But this time, they weren't coming from the front door. The sound echoed from the window in her bedroom. Mia's legs felt like lead as she stumbled back, her mind racing. Her husband was still asleep, oblivious to everything. She didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe. Whoever or whatever was out there seemed to sense her hesitation, her fear. Finally, after a moment that felt like an eternity, the silence returned. She stood there, straining to hear anything, but the house was quiet again. She mustered up the courage to peek out the window, heart pounding. But there was no one there, just the empty street bathed in the eerie glow of a streetlight. She tried to calm herself, telling herself it must have been a dream. Yet, as she turned to go back to bed, she caught sight of something outside the window. Written in a smeared red scrawl were the words, "Until next time." It was nearly midnight when Sarah's car broke down on a lonely stretch of road. Her phone was out of battery, and there wasn't a single light for miles. Only thick trees surrounded her, their branches reaching over the road like twisted, grasping hands. She remembered a gas station a few miles back, so she grabbed her flashlight and started walking. The silence was almost suffocating. Her footsteps crunched along the gravel shoulder, echoing into the emptiness. Then, about 10 minutes in, she heard it, a soft scraping sound somewhere in the darkness behind her. She stopped, shining her flashlight back, but there was only the empty road. Convinced she was imagining things, she turned to keep walking, but as soon as she did, the noise began again. Soft, unnervingly close. Sarah's heart began to pound. She started walking faster, her pulse quickening with every step. Suddenly, she felt it, a shadow shifting just at the edge of her light. She whipped around, and there it was, a figure standing in the darkness just beyond the reach of her flashlight. She squinted, her pulse roaring in her ears. Whoever it was had no clear shape, a dark mass that seemed to breathe and pulse, as if it were alive but not fully formed. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. The shadow took a step closer. Sarah's breath hitched. She took a step back, nearly tripping as her heel hit the gravel. The figure didn't respond, didn't say a word. It just waited, like it knew she had nowhere else to go. She spun around and broke into a sprint, her flashlight bouncing wildly with every step, casting eerie shadows on the trees. As she ran, she could feel it, whatever it was, following, close. She didn't dare look back. She kept running until she could see the gas station's faint glow up ahead. a small oasis of safety in the night. She stumbled into the station, breathless, her heart hammering against her ribs. The old cashier behind the counter looked up at her, unfazed by her panic. "Rough night?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "There was someone out there," she panted, barely able to catch her breath. She glanced out the glass door, but the road was empty, dark, as if no one had been there at all. The cashier just nodded, his face impassive. "Yeah, people say they see things out there sometimes," he said slowly. "There used to be a man who lived near that road, years ago. They say he wandered out there one night, looking for something, and never came back." Sarah stared at him, chills racing down her spine. "You mean he's still out there?" The old man shrugged. "Some say he is, but it's just a story." But as she looked back toward the road, she could swear, just for a moment, she saw a shadow move across the darkened trees. It was nearly midnight when Emily returned to her apartment, exhausted from a long day. She dropped her keys on the counter and switched on the bathroom light, preparing to wash her face and head straight to bed. As she looked into the mirror, something felt off. Her reflection stared back, but her eyes seemed slightly different, darker, colder. She brushed it off, assuming it was just her tired mind playing tricks. But as she reached up to remove her earrings, she froze. Her reflection didn't move. A chill ran down her spine. Emily lifted her hands slowly, fingers trembling. In the mirror, her reflection's hand stayed still, watching her with an unnatural stillness. She backed away from the mirror, fear gripping her chest. But the reflection suddenly raised its hand and pressed it against the glass, as if trying to reach her. Emily wanted to scream, but was paralyzed. Her eyes locked on the twisted smile slowly creeping onto her reflection's face. The figure in the mirror tilted its head, its mouth moving soundlessly, as though it were whispering secrets only it could hear. Then, it mouthed a single word, Emily's name. She backed up until she felt the cold bathroom wall behind her. In a flash, her reflection stepped out of the mirror. It didn't just step out, it emerged, materializing in front of her with the same clothes, the same face, but hollow, empty eyes and a wicked smile. Emily tried to turn, to run, but it grabbed her arm, its fingers icy and strong. As her world darkened, she felt herself being pulled, not just backward, but into the mirror itself. Her vision blurred as she felt her surroundings change, the room flipping until she was standing behind the glass, looking out. In horror, Emily watched her own body, the reflection that had become her, turn off the bathroom light and walk out of the room, leaving her trapped on the other side of the mirror. From the darkness, she saw herself smile. It was just past midnight, and Sam was almost done with his work in the tiny storage room of the office. He was the last one there, finishing up an inventory check. The fluorescent light above him had started flickering an hour ago, but he hadn't paid it much attention. Now, the entire room dimmed and brightened, casting strange shadows over the stacked boxes. Sam sighed, looking up at the bulb. "Really?" he muttered. He stretched to tap the light cover, hoping it would stop. For a second, it did, but as he stepped back, the flickering returned, faster and more erratic. Annoyed, he decided he would just wrap up and go home. He heard a soft thud behind him. Turning slowly, he saw that one of the boxes had fallen from the shelf. It was open, spilling papers across the floor. Sam sighed in irritation and bent down to pick them up. But as he gathered the papers, he froze. From the corner of his eye, he saw something, a shadow that didn't belong. He stood, heart pounding, and looked around the room. He was alone. The light flickered again, casting long, warped shadows along the walls. Sam blinked, sure that he'd seen a shape, a figure hunched low among the shelves, but it was gone. Feeling uneasy, he stepped back toward the door. That's when the lights went out completely, plunging him into total darkness. He fumbled for his phone, trying to use its flashlight, but just as he got it on, he saw something move. A shape creeping closer, silent and low to the ground. It looked like a person, but distorted, with limbs stretched at impossible angles. Its face was hidden in shadow, and it seemed to crawl forward in jerky, unnatural movements. Sam's hands shook as he took a step back. The thing paused, head tilted as if listening. It crawled forward again, only this time faster. Sam turned and bolted for the door, his heart pounding. But as he reached for the handle, a cold, clammy hand grabbed his arm, pulling him back. He turned to see the figure's face up close, hollow eyes staring at him with an unnatural hunger, its mouth twisted into a smile. Just as he opened his mouth to scream, the lights flickered back on. Sam blinked, breathless. The room was empty. He was standing alone by the door. But when he looked down at his arm, he saw faint red fingerprints slowly fading from his skin.